Kia ora and welcome to Constellations and All That. I'm your host, Tracy Cartwright, and together we will be exploring the world of family constellations with facilitators and clients from around the world, looking at different perspectives and experiences in the work, having a cup of tea and just chatting with some friends around their experiences in constellations. We'd love for you to join us. I hope that you enjoy this series as much as I have loved making it. Beautiful. Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to Constellations and All That. Today, I have the utmost pleasure of talking to the amazing Margarete Koenning. Koenning?
Yes. Yeah.
Koenning. Margarete. Generally, when I do these chats, interviews, whatever you want to call them, conversations, I don't introduce you like most podcast hosts do. They often have a little blurb and introduce you. I like my guests to introduce themselves. So you can share as much or as little as you like about yourself.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for that, Tracy. First, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I'm coming from and where I am actually talking from, the Gabi Gabi and the Jinabara people. And I'm really delighted to actually be here and have this conversation with you. My name is Margarete Koenning, and yeah, I'm born in Colombia, immigrated or went back actually to Germany, grew up in Germany, and immigrated to Australia 33 years ago. I'm a Gestalt therapist since over 40 years, and I met constellation work. I'm a social worker. My background is often, that I worked at the beginning with youth, and then I went into the hospital system where I worked as a therapist in rehab for a long time. And now I am here since 33 years in Malani, in a small village where I have my private practice and training, and I train international as well as, like here in Australia since over 20 years with Constellation, but Gestalt much earlier than that. Constellation work is really my passion. So I'm delighted to have this conversation, and I'm curious about all your questions you will ask.
I'm curious too, because I usually leave that for the field to decide what I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
One thing that I do generally ask is, how did you meet constellations? Like, what was your first experience with it?
Yeah. So my first experience was probably different than from a lot of people, because I met it in Germany, my first experience. And in a big, wasn't a big group actually, it was a very intimate space of 35 people doing constellation in connection to Gestalt therapy. And it was a process which we did, like over 7 days intensive with that group. And it blew me. I had worked, since over 20 years at that point, 20 years, around 20 years, with Gestalt therapy in a therapeutic sense. And what really struck me in this workshop was how clean and direct actually this process can go, like a Japanese sword, to the core of the issues, into the intergenerational connection of our being, and how it really provided the much bigger field than just the personal exploration. And that was, from then on, like I traveled every year to Germany and had training with all sorts of different groups. I then also went several times to Bernried, to train with Gunni and Bertolt Ulsma, and, also all the first generation people who were there at that time. And then we started actually I think it was Albrecht Ma, he was one of the first people who, Francesca was, but also Albrecht Ma, who came to Australia. It is actually very potent that we do this interview right now, because I have Bugula Ladi here with me, an elder, and she brought constellation work to Australia.
Wow.
We just had that conversation last night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is quite amazing, you know, like, and she's 84 and yeah, very sharp in her mind and very beautiful human being. And it's also nice to hear, you know, like how she got involved and how she brought it actually to Australia.
Fantastic. So because earlier you said that you were working with youth in a different career, different line of work, have you used or incorporated that with constellations, like taking your constellation to any sort of youth work?
I haven't, but I had quite some young people being in my constellations, you know, like wherever I think teenagers, and they love that work. They really thrive, you know,
Yeah.
in a way that is, I remember, you know, like one teenager, and he was, you know, like a foster child being, you know, sent away, sent away, and sent away. And he came to me and he said, you know, Marguerite, I want to take, you know, I want to be part of the group. And I said, yeah, beautiful. You know, like I invite you to be part of this group. And for him, it was like he was blown away. And at the end, it was very beautiful. I said to him, you were invited, you know, and he wanted to pay me this $50. He looked, you know, I said, you really have the invitation. You don't necessarily. He looked at me and said, no, Marguerite, no. This work is so profound and changed my life that I really want you to take my money. And he tried to save that for quite a while. $50 was a lot of money,
Yeah.
you know, for him. So I think that constellation work is particular designed also, you know, to introduce young people into that, you know, intergenerational connection and the ancestral connection back and get them out of isolation these days.
Yeah, that's such a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. You know,
Mm.
with because you know they have everything consistently on their devices and things, and often don't know how it is to be really socially adequate in a group of people.
Yeah, I see that. I have a teenager, and he's kind of growing up he's not an only child. I've got older children as well, but there's a really big age gap between him and the next one is 11 years.
Yeah,
So it's another family system.
yeah.
And I see that with him. Yeah,
Mm,
that's a turning point.
mm, beautiful.
So you are one of the founders or the founder of the Institute in
Yeah, you know, like that actually probably came out of a different situation, I can say, you know, like it's a founder or not founder. I'm getting older and I would like to pass on my knowledge. And that's really something that's why I love to teach. That's why I would like to pass on. Now, I often sit here in my office, you know, and see all the books and all the writings and all that what I have accumulated. And I thought, you know, there has to be something where I can actually pass it on so that doesn't end up really in the rubbish or wherever.
yeah, yeah,
And out of that idea, I had conversations with some younger colleagues, you know, who I had taught in the previous years, quite a while ago. And so we had that conversation, and out of that conversation, we decided to open this academy, Systemic Constellation Academy, to actually, yeah, provide a body which, you know, with a theoretical online component, but also very face-to-face and
yeah,
somatic experience-wise, to build a body and to build community in the constellation sense. And
yes.
yeah, and that is it's a very big privilege to have that created, and we will see where we go and where we travel. We are right at, you know, in a way, very fresh and at the beginning, and so we will see where that goes.
And what's the name of your academy?
Systemic Constellation Academy.
Beautiful. Not .au or just
I actually .au. Yeah, I think the young ones.
we'll roll with that for now until we
Yeah,
find put
yeah.
it in the thread. Okay, beautiful.
You know, one question which is looming, or one thing I probably would like to share is that also, you know, my interest in constellation in particular is to, and very personal, out of my, you know, history and out of my biography, being, you know, born in a South American country and then into a Western country and then back into Australia. Here, this, where do I belong, huh? What's my place? Where, you know, where is my ancestry? And so it took me quite a while to actually see that ancestry is walking with me consistently, you know, whichever land I walk, whichever place I go to. And constellation work brought something home to me that really reconciled also my shame of being German, you know, and having German ancestry. And you know, like, I think that was where constellation work for me started, is this disconnection from our ancestry, out of our shame we experienced through our parents, and, you know, their shame. Actually, I carried a lot of shame of my parents, and to really see it's not mine. Yeah, and with deep respect for what their history and what their experience was, but to really see, you know, like, I do not take that burden on, yeah, and hide behind it. So this passion I really find is leading people from disconnection to connectedness, you know, from isolation to connectedness. You know, if it is young people, if it is older people, if it is, you know, people with addiction or anxiety or stress, you know, these days there is so much overwhelm, so much things we have to deal with, yeah. And to find a place where they can really walk upright and be connected and open their eyes again to the love which is there.
Absolutely. I'd started some personal work when I met my second husband.
Mm.
I'd had a lot of trauma, and I think if I hadn't met Constellations, I don't know that I would be here, because of the amount, the way Constellation shifts things, and in the way and the layers that it shifts, the work that I've done so far.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you know, like, that is for me, you know, like this, it brought me home, not only Constellation, I must say Gestalt too, you know, within the Gestalt community, in the process of Gestalt therapy, in that holistic sense. But it brought me home to that I, you know, where I am also loved. Yeah. There is something in me and something in each of us which hasn't been touched. And that is a very profound concept.
And the beauty of this work is that you can feel it, right?
Yeah, that it is a somatic, and
you come out of the head, out of all that complicated thinking, and allow yourself, and there's this process of feeling it shifts the expansion.
It is a process which actually really allows you to drop in, to allow your nervous system to get healed and touched in a very somatic sense. Yeah, where the nervous system gets really healed in a cellular level rather than in a cognitive, where the phenomenology and the experience can integrate a new neural pathway.
I love that. Is there any constellations that you can think of that sort of stick with you, that things that over the years, and there might be one or two, or you might have a dozen, I don't know, that you feel confident that you can share without exposing anyone, or maybe just the experience of it that the listeners might.
Yeah. I had one story which really touched me very deeply, and that was in a one-to-one session, a young man. I mean, I have lots of healing stories. That is probably one unwritten book of one day. I would sit and write that. But it is often these young men who are so disconnected to their, you know, male lineage. I particularly probably witnessed this in Australia, where there is historically such a sense for male people. I I have to do it by myself, where I can do it all and I don't need any support. I don't know. And when then, really addictions or whatever other symptoms come in, and this person, he was very stuck in his total isolation through some traumatic experiences. But with the concept of constellation and with the reconnection of that, he could feel his spine. He started walking really tall and he started actually seeing the world in a different way. He could feel,
Wow.
like he could really feel, he went from a posture of this to a posture of really embracing, his spine and his body, and with that and walking into the community and receiving something totally new for him, where people looked at him and gave him smiles, he actually could collect the reconnection in himself. Yeah. And it took quite some time, but he was nearly like a melting process. He melted more and more and more into that being seen, proud, full in his potential and own dignity. Yeah.
It's hard to receive a smile, right? When you're looking down
Correct. Yeah.
to the scene. It's so beautiful.
So the environment actually even, changed one. And I mean, there is another story which is probably quite profound. I had a woman once, I will share that story, and she would give me permission. So, which is definitely, she gave me permission to do that. She was probably at that time in her 50s, mid 50s, whatever. It's quite a while ago, and she came and she had adopted out a child when she was young, out of the pressure of her parents, pregnant out of wedlock and not being able to, sustain. She didn't want to have an abortion, and she didn't know how to, bring up her child, and she was looking for her son for a long time and tried to, organizations got involved, blah, blah, for 5 years, I think, at that time. And we did that piece of Constellation where we brought him in and she could honor and actually tell him what happened from her perspective. And also honor the parents who look after him.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
To have that.
Yeah. And I think it was 3 weeks later that she got a letter from him.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was very clear he didn't want to have much further contact. But he honored her and acknowledged her, and that's all she needed for that time to resolve in her way. Now she knew was her own grief she still had to. Yeah.
Yeah. And to could move on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We get stuck in these times.
Yeah.
Fractal parts of us fragment off and we get stuck there sometimes. Parts of us do anyway.
Beautiful. And there is lots of examples. There's another young man who actually really struggled with addictions, highly addicted, alcohol, in earlier times, drugs and heavy drugs and stuff like this. And he came to a workshop, was also his first experience. And he had a huge conflict to his brother. He had been dry and he didn't drink, but that night before he actually did. And we had a really exploration of what happened there in relation to that. And it was very clear that his father died when he was 8 years old, and that grief had never actually been grieved. And how it also had to do with the relationship from the father to the grandfather, his grandfather, and was brought in. Until then, at one point, I put the essence, the clean essence of this ancestry behind him. And he first time could really lie into that male lineage and receive something which he could. And he was, he walked out a different man too, out of this workshop, and thanked me very much. Or the group actually, because the group was mainly the part who holds that space. And that's another thing which I really appreciate about this work, like when you work in a group setting, trauma occurs in isolation, huh?
That's true.
Yeah. And the healing can only take place in connection. That means that, like sometimes we can do a lot of healing work here, but as soon as we move into the village or we meet other people, the whole trauma is coming up again. And in constellation work, it is really the healing component is that you get witnessing and that you get feedback. You get the feedback from the community and from the environment, yeah, within your healing process. And that brings such a beauty and strength for the people, yeah, who are there as clients and explore the history.
Because you're witnessed.
Yeah.
And so often the traumas are not spoken.
Yeah.
They're not. And if it's something that's been hidden a long time in your lineage, there's sometimes things that have been concealed.
And other probably very important component for people to listen into the change to other therapeutic probably modalities, what I find very unique, is that is the support within that modality of really stepping out of my story, my identity with my story, that I am more than my story, that I am more than that what I experienced. Yeah, that my parents are more than their story and my grandparents, and that picture makes a huge pyramid into the much bigger field. And from that, we can also look, what the emerging future is. When I sit there and I just plan everything, and I think this is how it is and how it will be, is a really box I sit in, rather than in actual fact to open my heart to that what is probably unthinkable. I sit in my I can relate to that, my own process. It was very comfortable to sit in my victim. Yeah. Well, because it was familiar. But to have actually that experience, then I'm more than a victim. Yeah. The duality of victim and perpetrator and that dynamic, really opened something totally different for me. I feel I'm far more empowered and I'm far more resilient and strengthened in that moreness.
Are you saying because you recognize that there's both that in your family system and you recognize you're swinging between the two, or
How do you mean? I want to understand.
you said that you were comfortable in the victim, and
I'm
then
more comfortable in my wholeness.
but
That I
that you
actually
had been comfortable in your victim, and now you're comfortable in your wholeness. But you had to experience the energy of perpetrator to understand that to be whole. Is that
correct
what?
to include.
Yes.
Yeah, not to exclude and say, oh, I am the victim, I don't have to look there. Yeah, to really work with my resistance in bringing that in and finding a place that even that belongs to me.
So your family was from Germany, but your mum and dad were in Colombia when you were born. Is that correct?
That's correct. My family more or less left Germany because of the Second World War.
Okay. Yep. I think the beauty of this work, the amount of healing that has come out, and for the German people as well, right? Because it started there. Well, Constellations was birthed there, wasn't it? In the way that it came through.
It came out of that need that we, as in our collective field, had to deal with that denial and with the shame, enormous shame, yeah, of being children of perpetrators. Yeah, and how can that be reconciled?
Yeah.
For me, it was one of the most powerful experiences personally to be held from a whole group to sit with a Jewish person in the middle of that circle and really to look from my heart to their heart and to see and to sit in our humanity within that. And I really feel that is extremely important at this time of what is happening all over the world. if I can make a tiny little contribution to that movement out of that split, that would be, I think I can close my eyes one day and have a smile on my face.
Mm. And we know that it just takes that tiny little movement too, doesn't it? To make a big ripple
Yeah.
in the cosmos of consciousness, if that's what you want to call it, the field of consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah.
And opening your heart. I think I've shared on one of my earlier pieces that I did a piece of work with my daughter, it's the only piece I've ever done with her, but it was around, and it just invited her to open her heart
Yes.
towards. She was really struggling with her relationship with her dad, and I guess and part of that was me giving me, because been learning the work, giving her my blessing, because
Beautiful.
obviously there were times when I probably didn't give her my blessing in the early days.
Yeah.
Of our relationship ending. So going through that and then inviting her, and she said she could only open it a tiny little bit. And that was quite a few years ago now, and now they have a lot to do with each other. They're very connected, and yeah, really. So from that, there's opened up another
Yeah.
whole new
Yeah.
pathway.
Yeah.
Mm.
Beautiful. I remember that workshop Albrecht Mahr did here in Gympie in Australia, of all places, very funny. And it was a long workshop. It was 8 days or something, an intensive. And it was also very intense group, beautiful group, small group of 35 people, I think we were.
Mm.
And he didn't even do a constellation with me, but it was a total constellation.
Yeah.
Sometimes I ask, what is, if people ask me, is it, it's not, constellation is not just the concept of, systemic work is not bound to having to put up mama, papa, uncle, tante, like,
Yeah.
yeah. So it is really a much broader concept. And he just sat with me in my heart resonance for an hour.
Wow.
And how that whole shift, wow, I can still recall that cellular experience to sitting in that resonance, with
Mm.
that cohort and with that group. Yeah, I was nearly bursting, so full of love. And
I remember that feeling. I'm kind of feeling like I'm all over the place at the minute because I want to try and
yeah,
share this.
yeah,
And you said the whole thing was a constellation. I know for myself, with my experiences in the Australasian intensive, that from the time I decide to go, there's little bits coming up and building up to it. And the closer you get to it, the more things start to show up. And then for me, the experience of leaving New Zealand and going over there and the different threads and the people that I meet, and had some pretty wild experiences as I've peeled back. It's almost like a speed date in a way. You want to, like, because you're peeling back so much and come out the other end quite different.
I can tell you, like it is, you come out different. And there is, when you are really opening your being up to that profoundness of actually what comes towards you, something really shifts, for me, shifts, in my relationship to myself, but also to everything I meet. When I left the last intensive from Sydney, I went with public transport. And I felt so full and I felt so satisfied and so full in myself, and full of love, really. And I sat there on the ferry and was waiting for the ferry. I standing there, and a young man, first of all, came and said, "Oh, lady, you can sit here. You can take my place on a bench." So I just was a very nice little interaction. And I took that offer and so I sit down, and I sat down beside an Indian couple who was traveling, and they had a huge bunch of flowers with them. And we started a conversation, and they told me they just landed from Florida and they were off to meet a friend they hadn't seen 47 years. And they started really telling me this most, intimate. And then the woman tapped her husband on the shoulder and said, "You have to give her a rose. You have to give her a rose." So, so he went into that big bunch of flowers, got out a rose, ripped out this biggest rose and gave it to me. So I was sitting there with my suitcase, traveling home, and had a rose on the ferry, like traveling home. And I couldn't believe it, like what, in a way, what really happened, that recognition of something he saw in that field.
Yeah.
And then I was traveling and I looked at my rose and I thought, dear Rose, like you will travel 4 hours. I don't think you will survive really well on the plane and things. So let me know when you know where you go next.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going, and I had to get a ticket, and I didn't know how to. And there were two of helpers, in their vests, and a young man and a middle-aged woman, probably from Malaysia. And he was very boisterous and she was very shy. And they sat there and I got my ticket and went through, and then the man said, "Oh, is that a rose? That is such a rose. I would wish that I would have a rose like this." And she was very shy beside him, looking at me, very shy. And I turned to her and said, "Yes, and this incredible, beautiful rose, I think really belongs to you now." And she looked at me, started crying, looked twice, 3 times, and said, "Can you give me a big hug and hold me for a moment?"
Mm.
In the middle of of the tram. I thought that came out of Constellation,
Mm.
where it was working with consciousness and into the collective field.
Wow.
Such a beautiful experience.
And you exert that. You exude. No, you exude that. I feel that in your heart resonance whenever I'm just thinking of you, but also around you as well. There's such a beautiful heart energy that you carry.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, and I must say, I had really had, I'm so thankful, and I have a lot of gratitude to Constellation, to really the heart resonance that I experience also with my parents. Yeah, and my roots and my belonging is uncannily deep.
And there's more room when we remember that we're the little ones. Eh?
What I didn't hear that,
I
Tracy.
said there's more room in our hearts when we remember we are the little ones.
Yes.
When you first Constellations, were your parents alive?
Yeah.
What did you notice for yourself in the
Was my father, just hang on. My father wasn't alive anymore. But I can tell you that it didn't come out of Constellation, but came out of, and I think it was a constellation. If I look at that, maybe that was already in the field of my old teachers. Because, Hunter Boomer was one teacher of mine 45 years ago in the Gestalt community. Before what certainly brought me this work was that I had once a real urgent calling to spend a week with my father. I realized, I do not know this man that well. I need to know him before he dies. And I need to meet him, and I need to stretch my being with that. And I went and I asked my mother very respectfully if she could please visit my sister and leave me alone with him for a week. And that was a very profound shift. It wasn't all easy, but like it was, we cried together, we made music together, we just sat and were quiet together, just to be and to ask him things I have never dared to ask.
Yeah.
And I think the constellation, my mother was still alive until, when did she die? 2000, yeah, and 8. And I was doing, she died. It was 90. And she herself did a lot of, with Judith Hemming.
Oh wow. Okay.
not with Judith, actually, with Judith's teacher, so a generation before that even, Marianne Frey.
Oh,
She worked with her. So in a way, she was an unusual woman, ahead of her time.
yeah.
Far ahead of her time. But yeah. So constellation work certainly brought to me to not get caught into the story, to really step into who am I in relation to my parents,
Mm.
and they are the ones I have. There is no other
Yep.
parents.
Yeah. It's very easy to get caught in your story, isn't it? Of
Yeah.
what we didn't have or what we had too much of. Or,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah. What wasn't there and what wasn't here and what wasn't, yeah.
Mm.
And to really get led into that place of, was exactly the right mother. And I'm not her mother. That was for me a profound piece.
Mm.
I also don't have to be the bigger one.
Yeah.
I'm the little one. I can't get arrogant and think that I know better than her.
Mm. If you could describe the work to someone who had never heard of it, how would you describe it?
Constellation work.
Yeah.
I would describe it as a journey back home to our roots, to reclaim what belongs to us and to leave behind what doesn't suit,
Mhm.
and to reconnect really with our pure essence and our full potential.
I love that. That's beautiful. So clear, so true, and so beautifully put. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What would there's another question that's just floating around. Hold on.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the healing sentences, isn't it? Kind of waiting for them to drop in.
Yeah.
Who would you say do you have a favorite teacher or teachers?
Who I have a deep respect for is definitely Guni Baksa,
Mhm.
and I really, Albrecht, Snee, Francesca, Boring, there is Hunter. I find, he is very inspiring I find for me, in that exploration of the spiritual component of constellation work.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed the spiritual talks Hunter gave in Bernried in the mornings. Victor Chu was one of my first experiences. He is a constellator and as well as a Gestalt therapist, and he has written 2 books.
What's his last name?
Victor Chu.
CHO
Yeah, I think so.
or CHU?
He's from Germany. CHU. But there is numerous of Ursula Franke. I really like Marianne. What's for Marianne's name? Second name I don't know, recall. But who I really also really very stimulated by is certainly Jan Jacobs.
Yes. When you were starting to talk, I could feel Jan Jacob. I love his. He's more organizational. It's like that's where he has
situated.
Yeah, but he's so broad in that, and he brings so much, right?
Yeah. He brings a lot of stimulation for your brain to really see systems in a totally different way, so. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I'm probably got a whole lot more questions, and I'll think about them afterwards, but
yeah,
you're like,
I find, it's time with this connection of New Zealand and Australia to actually, I'm really excited about that, that exchange, and to really see and to explore. I've done one workshop in New Zealand long time ago in Christchurch, where Rudolf Jarosewski, he organized it at that time, which is in Miriam, his wife, which is a long time ago. And I'm so curious to see the similarities, but also to embrace in the differences.
Yes, so you'll be here in April next year
Mm-hmm.
for our Aotearoa New Zealand Constellation immersion, which is amazing. It's going to be amazing in order to do it. So, um, yeah, I look forward to having you in our space and yeah, being part of this beautiful offering and also for you to receive, yeah, I think we do are very unique. We have a unique way of offering our work here and yeah,
Beautiful.
it's going to be amazing. I can feel it. It's very so good.
So I really thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to travel your country, to see your country, and to walk on that soil.
Welcome. Always welcome. And with that, thank you so much, Margarete. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. And yeah, look forward to seeing what else is possible with
Beautiful.
what else the field wants us to do, hey?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Head over to Instagram and tell me what's resonated for you with this episode. You'll find me at tracy.cartwright. That's Tracy with no E. .cartwright. Or head over to my website, tracycartwright.co.nz, and receive a free audio with the gift from your ancestors. So until next time, be kind to yourself and have fun doing it.